Hi, everybody. This is Erica Mello, and welcome to episode number 70 of Tough to Treat. And if you are listening to this live when it comes out on April 23rd, we are still in the midst of the COVID-19 crisis in the world. And both Susan and I want to wish you and your family health and happiness and safety during this time. We've actually been doing some Facebook Lives during this time in our Facebook group, Tough to Treat. And it's been a great way for both of us to stay connected and stay connected with all of you. And if you are not a member of the group, please join. It's called Tough to Treat. This patient is a patient of mine who I actually just saw once before we had to temporarily close our practice. And of all the patients, just to see once and then progress virtually, this is one of my top 10 on the tough list, to be honest. Multiple joint pain, significant anxiety, and super focused on pain. So Susan and I clinically reasoned through my evaluation and subsequent treatments that I've been doing virtually, and it's an ongoing process. So we really hope you enjoy it, and all the best to you. Hi, everybody. This is Erica Mello and Susan Clinton, and welcome to podcast episode number 70. We have
Big number 70.
More till 100. We're going to have to celebrate at 100, Susan.
Absolutely.
We'll
have to have our what is it, diamond celebration at 75.
Jubilee. Mm-hmm. All righty. We'll have to have a special patient on that day. They're all special. All right, so let's get into it. This patient, we're recording this end of March, and this is a patient I saw a couple of weeks ago, right before the coronavirus crisis really hit New York City. I saw him once in the office, and then I have seen him twice via telehealth sessions. So I will give you the background. He is in his 40s. He came in, I'll give you his complaints or his issues. He basically came in to see me. The reason that he brought him in was right-sided low back pain. In the history, he came out and said that, I have right-sided low back pain. It occasionally goes to my left side. I have, my words, not his, bilateral shoulder pain, bilateral foot pain, bilateral hip pain. And the issues started a long time ago, as most of them do. He was in high school. And so he's in his 40s now. So he was in high school. He was squatting heavy, like 300 pounds on the barbell, and very much into, it wasn't competitive weightlifting, but he was going that route in the sense that he was doing a lot of Olympic lifting and just really a ton of weight on him. And he felt at some point during that time that it was probably in the 300 to 400 weight range that he felt like his back gave out, quote unquote. That back gave out. He managed it for some time. He was a basketball player as well in high school, so he supplemented the basketball with lifting. In his senior year, he had an MRI. They had some, disc bulges, et cetera, on the MRI. His hips were very, quote unquote, super tight. He's had, quote unquote, rotator cuff issues. That's the bilateral shoulder. He's had therapy over the years, not really helpful. He had this past summer, he had an upper back injury. Insidious, not an injury, it's just insidious onset of upper back pain. He was pointing to his upper thorax. He's also, which I thought was really interesting, Susan, he complained of some testicular pain, on and off. So I'll review. Low back pain, right worse than left from a lifting injury, compression most likely in high school, bilateral hip issues, bilateral foot, some testicular pain, bilateral shoulder pain. He has had a concussion 5 years ago, and he had another concussion prior, younger, when he was younger, like 16. So 16 years old and 5 years ago. So there is some time. Uh, Gets occasional headaches, has had some stress fractures, and had a right knee issue, I think a right knee scope in 2013. What really bothers him in terms of his back, because that's what brought him in, was sitting. Sitting wasn't the best for him. Swimming, hiking, ironically. Running, he said, was not as bad with regards to his back symptoms. In terms of any other, in the morning, he has some low back pain when he gets up. It really sort of goes away. Besides the sitting, any kind of exercise that he's been given or done in the past has aggravated him. My guess is like, any PT exercises. Like he said, he was doing some back extensions with the therapist when he was, I don't know, a while ago. That didn't really help, and that flared him up, things like that. So he will get on a bike, put his hands on the bike, and not clip in, but just put the feet in the toe clips, not feel good. He'll take his hands off the bike. He'll go down and read a book or something, and that'll feel better.
So when he sits
So,
up on the bike, he feels better.
yes. Yes. Let me see if there's anything else that I missed that was pertinent, because this history took a while for me to get, but I'm really trying to condense it. He's done some stretching and foam rolling over the years, not really helpful. I will tell you, he's over 6 feet, 6'2", 6'3", quite tall actually. Hence the basketball when he was in high school. He wears orthotics. He just switched to soft orthotics, which I'll tell you about. Actually didn't help his feet at all. Any questions before I go into what I saw or what I did?
Any other medical history?
No.
No
Nope.
cardiovascular? Was he asthma?
Nope.
Does he have GI issues? Does
Nope.
he anything else besides the headaches?
No.
What did he
Anxiety. Anxiety.
Okay, anxiety.
Very,
Okay.
very high.
Okay.
Very high. No meds for that. Meditates very frequently, which is
That's
good.
good.
Yep.
That's actually good.
Yep.
What else is he doing for the anxiety?
Nothing really at this point. Trying to exercise, but whatever he
old
does.
Is he?
He's in his mid-40s.
Mid-40s. What does he look like? Like, does he look healthy? Does he look
yes,
like he needs the sun? Does he look?
He's a little pale. He's a little pale. A little pale. Tall.
Mm-hmm.
Sort of office worker. Not really. Like his bike is indoors. Like it's indoor exercise. He doesn't. He'll run occasionally outside, he said, but it's mostly spends the time indoors in front of a computer at 6'2".
Is he lanky?
Yes. Yeah. Low muscle tone. Yep. Lanky, hypermobile. Yep. And he also swam a lot as a kid, but mostly the high school. It really began in high school with that squatting injury, that compression injury. So he'll say his hips are super tight, everything's super tight, but it's not really tight. It's just he's got loose joints and his muscles are trying to hold him in. But that's really. I mean, he said some genetic. Mother had low back pain, et cetera, but nothing else. Eats fairly okay. As I said, I've seen him once in the office, and then I've done the rest telehealth.
So he's never been diagnosed with any kind of connective tissue disease or.
You mean like Ehlers-Danlos? Or no?
or Stanlove Marfan's is what's coming to mind for me. That's why I was asking
Yeah.
about his heart.
Yeah.
So he's on the
Interesting.
edge of this stuff.
Yeah, that's a
I mean,
good
because
question.
you're putting it to 6'2", lanky, pale,
Yeah,
is all kinds of joint issues. Whether it's a true joint dysfunction or not, he certainly has widespread pain.
that's for sure.
And it's he's anxious. Just, that's why I was wondering if he was ever diagnosed with anything like fibro or Ehlers-Danlos or Marfan's or ankylosing
No,
spondylitis,
no,
which is
but
a very atypical presentation of ankylosing spondylitis.
yeah,
Unless he's got some Scandinavian background. Usually females present this way with ankylosing spondylitis, not men. They present more with with a stiff, stiff TL junction and start, they have a lot of pain.
what
But
about this? The testicular pain that threw me.
well,
And,
that's why it's part of
yeah,
this. It's part
yeah,
of this presentation.
yeah, yeah,
This anxiety and this stuff that goes on. The threat. Testicular pain is probably more than likely neurogenic.
yeah,
Could be neuropathic, could be neurogenic.
yeah.
Just but it's sometimes a response to threat. It's
Mhm.
it's all the
Yeah,
time. Why does somebody who sits have problem with testicular pain and other people don't?
yeah,
But this is there's this looks like to me some sort of physiological metabolic kind of issue
yeah.
that's going on here that has I mean this is kind of but there's got to be some brain changing going on here
Well,
too.
he's got two
The
concussions. Yeah,
neurotags or the neuromatrix here for him is pretty well lit up, and
jacked
it
up.
keeps
Yep,
spreading. So it
yep,
started at one point in his life and it just kept going.
yep.
And I'm just wondering what his belief system is in all of this.
So
There's something that has to be fixed, if he's chasing that, or if it's something that just needs to be kind of, he's doing the meditation, which is great. And I'm
yes.
just wondering what the pain catastrophization
So this
kind of piece
is
might be with him.
yeah. So before I get into like the objective, but
Yeah.
he told me that he's been seeing somebody, which is they've been really focusing on back extensions, and I'm like, at this point,
Mm-hmm.
that's not going to
Mm-hmm.
be helpful. But he told me that if he has to think, so for example, there are patients I'll say, notice when you're squatting, if you're shifting to the right or left. Notice if you're sitting a certain way at work. Just notice things. If I say that to him, he's extremely anxious. He
Yeah.
just will not. I can't tell him to do that. And he said that
Yeah.
right at the up front about it.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been trying to, maneuver around that. So for, like a self-check won't cut it.
Yeah.
That will send him through
Well,
the roof in
because
anxiety.
yeah, well, and that makes sense because look at everything that he's been, that he's got this neural matrix going on that's got all these neurotags everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And every time somebody asks him to focus on it, it probably gets worse rather
Exactly.
than getting better, so he over focuses,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
over
Mm-hmm.
attends to these things. And that just heightens the sensitivity of the system.
Yep.
If it drives the anxiety is part of the neurotag, that's in that neuromatrix there.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, you're right to avoid anything that's going to increase the anxiety for that because it's not going to be helpful.
Yes.
He's hyper focused on this stuff. And so
Totally.
increasing the hyper focus even more is going to, yeah, I totally agree with you that that's definitely something that you would want to hang back or stay away from.
Yep.
So,
Because he had multiple issues, the movement that I look at, because he had shoulders, foot, I looked at a squat with a bilateral arm lift. I said,
mm-hmm,
let me look at you in standing. Let's just see how you move. Because I
mm-hmm,
write that from the subjective, I knew that I wasn't going to find one thing. I mean, wasn't going to find something that I was going to hang my hat on, right? It's going to be a
yeah,
joint function, and there's no way
yeah.
that was going to happen. So I said, let's look at a movement that just takes
Let's
into
get
account
curious.
everything.
Mm-hmm. Let's get curious.
Exactly. And so in standing, obviously lanky, tall, for people who are interested, of some of the biomechanical aspects, I'll briefly talk about it, but obviously flat real lordosis, significant shifts in his thorax. He's right-handed, so he had this intragirdle shoulder girdle torsion to the left. His right hip was forward. I mean, these are just common compensations of all his issues. The one thing that I did look at, his net center of mass. His net center of mass was way left. And I don't know, and that was pretty consistent. Thorax, head, pelvis, everything was to the left. I'm not sure why, but that's how he presented that particular day. So interestingly enough, when I had him squat and lift his arms up, he went the other way, like way, I mean, obviously, like you could see it like a mile away. He squatted, arms lift, no shoes, no orthotics, nothing. His feet were, he had very poor arch support. I mean, he really very, very flat feet. Was in the process of getting new orthotics as I saw him. He's worn them for years. So, those are the only issues I saw on his feet, the typical, flat feet, the center of mass to the left. But when he squatted, it was like the other trajectory, way to the right. I had him not take the arms down. Let's squat without the arms. Still to the right, but a little bit less. So because of the history of concussion, I went around. I mean, I should do this with everybody, but I went around to the front to look at his face and his deepening of his eye sockets to see if there was any hollowness in one of the eyes. Looked at his eye movement with squatting. I know we've talked about this many times, and I'm doing this more and more as we talk about it. So when I could put him in front of a mirror, but I didn't. I just looked at him. So I had him squat, and it was like his left eye went backward. It was like his left eye was sunk more. If that makes sense. Does that make? Does that make sense? So he had some issues up in his cranium, head, not so much in his cervical spine, but I saw something with his eye movement. It was like not a saccade, but like a flittery, and then the eye was like the sphenoid was more posterior.
Well, he's had 2 concussions, right?
He has, which is why I went and looked at it.
Residual, so there might be some residual neurological compensations going on in there, which you're going to see that with fluttering and changing. And it's not that the eye actually recedes into the head, but the muscles of the eye don't hold it in a certain way. So it looks like it's
like a deepening.
Yes. I want people out there to kind of understand what we're seeing here, what we're talking about. It's not that you're actually, it's not like the face itself is deforming when he moves, and that's what a lot of people are probably thinking that we're saying, and we're not saying that at all. But the eye muscles can actually bring the eyes forward out of the sockets, or they can sink them back into the socket. And so depending upon what the neurological response to movement is for the eyes, that can change on people. Yes. And so, when you see it one-sided like that, it's kind of a little bit weird. Because we all have if you look in the mirror, you've got one eye bigger than the other.
Absolutely.
Everybody does. That's normal. So we one foot a little bit bigger than the other. We have one hand that's a little bit more dominant than the other for most people. But we'd certainly, if we put our hands together and cross our fingers, we have a certain way that we do it that feels, we're hardwired in certain ways.
Yep.
Just are.
Yep.
But when you have something that comes in, like perhaps maybe the 2 concussions, maybe because he's tall, maybe because of where it's a combination of so many things, where his computer screen is, just the way that he's always looked in the mirror, from which side does he usually stand on. All of these things kind of ring up. And so when you're taking somebody like that into a full body movement, which I find fascinating that you did, what you're seeing is just, the head is moving in space. Yep. But you're also asking the body to do something different. He's not squatting down and grabbing something. He's squatting down and raising his arms up in the air. So it's kind of like rubbing your tummy and patting your head at the same time. It's something we can do, and we can certainly learn to do and train in, but it's probably not instinctual, because we usually don't raise our arms up in the air when we squat down.
Right.
because what we have to kind of think about, what functional purpose does, like, why would somebody do that? Maybe they would if they're going to hang on to the monkey bars and bring their knees up. But, so that's why I find it interesting, because that's where when you take them out of pattern, sometimes that's where you see, kind of weird things emerge. Like, why did he go all the way to the right when he stands all the way on the left? And is that something that's vestibular, ocular, that's going on there, that's saying, so I find that fascinating.
Yeah,
But I just wanted the listeners to kind of understand what we're looking at, that the cranium itself is not deforming.
No.
Erica's not talking about, like, an upslip of the temporal bone or something like that. She's talking about the neurological presentation of the cranial nerves.
Yes.
That are ringing in a different way. The face can droop more, the face can smile more. It can be very subtle differences like that. The eyebrows can go up on one side.
Yes.
It look like their ear is lifting up.
Yes. Or like Bert and Ernie head, Bert and Ernie.
Yeah. Exactly.
So yes, his left socket was deepening.
Yeah.
That's really basically, and that's the only thing. But because of the history of concussion, I was like, note it down. Maybe it's relevant, maybe it's not. But I did look at that. And I think I would say anybody, I'm no expert on concussion, but I would say anybody with a history of concussion, you need to look at things like that. So even if it's because sitting did bother him, the squat was a natural movement, but I didn't choose it for that. I chose it because he had multiple areas of complaints. I mean, every body part hurt practically except his knees. So, in order to get the most bang for your buck in an evaluation, we don't have like 2-3 hours here. So just choose one full body movement where you can evaluate all of those issues. At the very least, we have to start somewhere. And that's what I did. So when he squatted, once again, he shifted all the way to the right. And so what I did was, this is how I do my assessments. I mean, do them differently, but I tried to modify certain things, try to prevent him from going to the right. And so basically I put my hands on his pelvis, and the minute I felt that pull to the right, I prevented it, basically. I prevented it. So I put my hands on there and I centered him first. So I got him centered. And I said, squat with the arms. And then he was good. And then I had this huge pull in like the front of his pelvis, anteriorly, like rectus abdominis, anterior pelvis, pelvic floor, maybe, and then it was so strong. I was always holding him, but then he couldn't squat. Yeah. So I let go, and then boom, to the right.
Okay.
So
yeah, he's definitely over recruiting in his anterior chain.
Yeah.
And he shouldn't be over recruiting the anterior chain in a squat.
Mm-hmm.
So that so whatever's happening there, that rotation that he's getting to go into the squat is allowing him to go down. And when you take that translation, which is essentially taking some of the rotation out of there, that's like putting the hands on the wall, right?
Yes.
It kind of takes rotation out of the system.
Yep.
I'm just wondering, is it a balance issue that he's causing him to over rotate because of what you saw in his eyes? Or is it another issue that, just that neuromatrix issue that, when he's in certain positions, he over recruits. We know people with widespread pain have over, a lot of people talk about, they're unstable. They can't, I hate that word, that they need more control. And it's like, actually they have too much.
Yes, exactly.
They're overworking. And that to me is a classic sign of, I wonder if that is part of the reason that he's getting some pain into his groin and genital region.
Yep.
Because of the over recruitment there, while he's sitting. Especially if he's sitting and he's not twisting. Maybe
he's totally slumping.
Go the other way. Yeah. And so
6'2". Yeah.
Yeah, and so and that's interesting that when you took the rotation away, that he actually tended to over recruit the anterior chain, and then and of course you're unable to squat if your pelvic floor tightens up, and your that anterior chain starts to kick in. You're not going to be able to sink to the floor.
No.
Can't do it.
And what was interesting is absolutely, and I had this experience once with another patient. This was, I think, on one of our original podcasts on a junior golfer. I was trying to prevent some rotation, and I couldn't do it, and this guy had knee pain. So very similar to over recruiting certain muscles. So I took a quick look up and down the chain. So I, as he was squatting, as I was trying to prevent him from shifting, I took a look at his head, make sure it wasn't way right, way left.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing. That was pretty much the same. I took a look at his lumbar spine just to see if there was anything, visually, because I couldn't really let go of my hands. Nothing. I didn't see any increased lordosis. Nothing there.
Mm-hmm.
I took a look up at his thorax because he had multiple shifts through there, as to be
Mm-hmm.
expected. You add a shift in one part of your system, you're going to have a shift in the other part just to keep your eyes straight and stand up straight. So nothing really crazy there. But what did look better were his feet.
Mm-hmm.
So then I moved on. What I did now, and I'll just go through this quickly because I'm at a point now, because I've already seen him for two virtual visits. So I went in and did a series of other modifications. Okay. I went in, and because the lumbar spine was an area of meaning for him, you have to touch. I went in and I palpated. In standing. This guy hasn't even gotten on the table yet. In standing, I went in and just did some, felt for hypertonicity, did a little put my thumbs on the transverse processes, did a little decompression, so he felt basically. So, and I said, let me just have you, squat. I'm just going to sort of keep my hands, and I want to see what goes on. I'm going to close my eyes. I just want to feel what goes on in your lumbar spine, because that was meaningful for him. I had no way did I ever think that the lumbar spine was the cause of the problem, but I wanted him to be heard and felt.
Mm-hmm.
So he squatted. He went to the right. I felt zilch show there. I'm nothing really. So I expected that. So I moved on, and then because of the history of concussion and because of in standing, his head, obviously he had a little bit of a forward head, completely normal and typical, because everything was to the left in standing. It didn't get worse than the squat. Like the head and the thorax, stayed left while the pelvis went to the right. I said, let me just try the head. Let me go up into the head and just keep the neck, just sort of center it. Let me see if his system likes that. I centered his head. I said, squat. Susan, when I tell you, he squatted, he went so far to the left, he almost fell over. I was like, this guy doesn't like any input right now into his system, at least the input I'm giving him, right? So I said, oh, and he was like in shock. And I said, wow, your system doesn't like that. So I went back up, did it again, just sort of, I said, all I'm doing is just preventing your head from, moving. I'm in my words, I basically say, I'm trying to do what some of your muscles should be doing. He's like, oh, okay, I get that. So I, held on, and I had him squat again, and it was way to the left. So I said to myself, any intervention at this point in the neck would be counterproductive. It's making him go way left. It's causing him to have a twist in his system, whether it's dural or whatever. That's not helpful. So let me know your thoughts on that, and I'll because I want to move on a little bit.
Yeah. When I run into that, and I see that if we move their head in a different way, or it makes, what I'm sensing with this guy is how he copes with load transfer.
Yeah.
Which drives back to some of that over recruitment neuromatrix, kind of stuff that's going on, protectionist type of thing. And one thing that I've learned from Jessica Schwartz, through the years and listening to her podcast, the Concussion Corner, or whichever one it is.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I should know it. I'll put it in the show notes, the right one.
Yep.
But, it's one thing that I've learned is that even post-concussion, people still, the protective part of the brain is still sensing threat, even if they heal. Because how much is healed, how much is still, because that was a big thing. When the brain is jostled around like that,
yep.
The threat piece goes way up. And so widespread pain is a part of that, can be a part of that.
Yeah.
And so one system can drive the other system can drive that. And that to me is probably why when you got up into the head neck area, it just, it was unable to cope with the changes there.
Yeah, totally.
Because it's kind of got this pattern held that it needs to go to the right, or else it just can't cope with it. And so that to me is kind of like, how is he coping with load transfer all the way through his system?
Yeah.
And when you got his pelvis straight, his feet kind of did a little bit better, and so maybe kind of entering. So when you have a system that's hot, like you're finding here, my thing is to not go into the hot system, to go into I would be like, okay, let's go back and do single leg. Let's see what's happening. I would be like pelvis down to the feet more than I would be
Exactly.
thorax up to the head.
Yep.
That would just be me at this point, just
Yeah.
because of what you found. It'd be like, okay, that's just making everything worse, and maybe he's going to drive his anxiety, especially if he feels like he's falling over. So
yeah. So it was actually, he was like, oh, that's interesting, like very analytical, so when I looked at the head, when I corrected the head and the pelvis went over, I was like, I'm done, moving on. I don't care what I'm not, next line, next thing. I did, at that point, I had not really done anything to his thorax because that's a bias of mine. I went in, and this is what I did. I went in and it's very similar. I did some decompression. I won't get into the specifics of his ribs 8-7, 3-4, sort of lower, mid-lower, got a bit of a change, not 100%. I will tell you this. Hold on in 1 second. When I went in and this is hard as a therapist to do this, but I went in and sort of had my left hand on his upper ribs, my right hand on his lower, and I was trying to correct a couple sets of ribs or rings as I've learned them. I was trying to do them both together, okay? And that's hard skill, okay? But when I did that and I had him squat, he looked actually much better. However, the only thing that didn't, so what I did was I had him turn his head to the right, had him turn his head to the left before I went in and did the decompression in the thorax. When I did the decompression in the thorax, I had him turn his head to the right, had him turn his head to the left, no change. If there was, and that's my quick and dirty way because I can't get my hands off his thorax to see if there's any effect on the neck. Didn't really change the neck at all. So at this point, I was like, okay, we could possibly have something in the thorax, definitely something in the neck, and potentially something in the pelvis. That's where I was at the end of this evaluation. I'm like, was it dural? His system doesn't like to be lengthened. There's not one area of the body that I'm getting the most bang for my buck in this particular evaluation. I got him on the table, did your classic slump, straight leg, right. Quick, nothing, like zero. I did some passive excessive, I wanted him to feel felt again on the table. Did that, hypermobile.
So
nothing abnormal in a on the table, supine prone position.
at the end of the day, did you find anything mechanical going on?
No.
Okay. That's my big point here.
Yeah.
Is that this is somebody who is not going to probably present with a mechanical thing, because I think we're dealing with a super sensitive nervous system.
Yeah, I agree.
That has a strong anxiety driver.
Yep.
Or a strong anxiety, I shouldn't say driver, sorry. A strong anxiety component. That is the, so it's a balancing act here to, for somebody like this. So some of the things that I do when I have clients is I ask questions such as, what do you think is going on?
I did that.
Yeah, and I'm dying to hear what his answer is. And then, what are you really in your heart of hearts afraid of? Like, what is really scaring you about this?
Yeah.
Like really down deep, what are you worried about? And then what your expectations are.
Yeah.
Because it's hard to shift people like this away from a biomechanical approach when they need to be shifted away from a biomechanical approach.
And that's what he's
yet still
so
talk
far
about the musculoskeletal movement system, neurological system. So it's not all about, your joints are injured, your joints are damaged, your joints are compressed. It's more like you've got this widespread neurological, neural matrix going on.
Yeah.
And that's why all this, and that's why nothing helped. That's why the back extension exercise didn't help. That's why the rotator cuff muscles
totally
help. Nothing's gonna help. Like that. Like, because it's not about that.
And do you know
he system working
exactly?
together.
And we were chatting, and so there's a great book by Norman Doidge, The Brain That Changes Itself. He's like, oh, I've read that. I was like, what?
Read it.
Great book. He's read it. He read it. Anybody who hasn't read that book, it's fantastic. Norman Doidge, The Brain That Changes Itself.
I've got it
He
up.
read
I'm
the
looking
book,
at my
Susan.
bookshelf right now.
I
Yep,
know.
there it is.
So I'm like, explain pain. Okay. So he's like, he hasn't read that, but I think he will. He's the kind of guy that appreciates a little bit more of an analytical explanation. But balancing that out with not creating an anxiety really jacking his system up. So I was explaining to him that there could be a few things going on, but the majority, your system doesn't like to be lengthened. And I was trying to explain that quickly, because let me tell you, this took way over my time that I had allotted. I had a cancellation after him, thankfully. So, but this took a lot of time. So at the end of the day, I did ask him what he thought was going on. And he said that he felt that the compression injury years ago set off a cascade of events that he hasn't been able to manage, which I would agree. But, I said.
But it's important to get that, though. You need to figure out where their belief system is coming from.
Yes.
Because you need to tread carefully when you're starting to have them, when you want that belief system to change, so that they begin to realize that pain doesn't always equal harm at this point in time for him. But for him, it does right now. And it's, you have to honor that, because if you cover his narrative with your own, you're going to lose him.
Yeah.
Not you. I'm just talking about everybody, all of us out there, all of us practicing clinicians. We have to join up and go, how can I partner with him to be able to begin to start to help him change that belief system a bit, and trust that, there's more to it than just the fact that I have a back injury that's been going on since age 16. No, that back is healed. That thing is gone, long gone, but it's the pattern is in there, and boy, there's been other things that have come into the pattern, and certainly there's reasons. His pain is very real. It's just not for the belief that he thinks it is.
Right.
And so it's kind of like, how do we kind of butt up next to each other and really begin to join that co-narrative together? Rather than, you could have just sat down and said, well, there's nothing wrong with your back. Right. Well, that's not going to help anybody.
Right, exactly.
But, you did at the end of the day, you said, there's multiple things going on.
Yeah, exactly.
And you could feel it too. And then you ask them about the book, and then all of a sudden you have an in.
Yes.
It's like, okay, this guy likes to read. This guy is interested.
Oh, totally.
This is where I can kind of go in. He doesn't want to hyper focus on his body. You probably need to get him into some mindfulness work at some point, so that he can feel movement and be okay with it, and not be afraid of it, because it scares the hell out of him, obviously.
Right.
But you've got an in there with him with that intellectual curiosity. And it's like, ooh, right there's my opening to kind of what can I slide in here that can begin to help him begin to change that belief system a little bit, but not in a way that's going to, like you say, hit the neurotag on the anxiety button.
Right. Yeah. And I said to him, how is this affecting you? And he's like, I can't exercise.
Yeah.
It's like, I mean, that would affect me. I mean, I would lose it. I'm here right now on a Stairmaster at home when I'm normally going a Soul Cycle. Okay. It affects people when you can't exercise. Right. So I get that. And in terms of what his expectations were, he didn't mention pain. He just wants to be able to exercise.
And I also find this, to trace this all the way back to the very beginning thing that you said, swimming bothered him.
Yeah.
But what do you do when you swim? With your head?
You turn.
Yeah, exactly. Both directions to breathe, or one direction or whatever.
Yeah.
And so it makes everything worse.
Yeah. Yes.
Why does swimming bother him?
Oh, yes.
Right? Water is compressive. It should make him feel better. It should, But what about getting in the pool and moving, like walking and doing that kind of stuff? Maybe we can look at the pool as a different medium for him, but not face down swimming, arms overhead, turning his head. Firing that whole system up again.
That's right, Susan.
Yeah.
I hadn't thought of that. That's great, because once again, we always try to tell students, from the subjective, you'll get your objective. I mean, you have to do the objective, but that's right. It's interesting. That's a great point.
And that'll be a way you can tie that back to him about, this is why we're going at this, because think about the things that bother you.
Yeah.
We know your body doesn't like compression, okay, but it doesn't like to lengthen either. So that's a little weird, but we'll figure that out.
Yeah.
Here's the deal, like swimming.
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
remember the squat thing and falling over and that
Yeah.
stuff, and
Yeah.
you know
Running is good, which makes
so
sense. You're running like
yeah,
this.
because you're all compact together in a little, and holding everything together, and all the muscles get to over recruit, and it's all great,
Mhm.
for a short
Mhm.
period of time. But you get in the pool, and it may not be so much the lengthening as it is all the rotational pieces and
Yes.
this stuff that
Yes.
fires all of that up, and and then the water and the maybe you're breathing, maybe you're not, maybe your brain is realizing, hey, we have to breathe, and
Yep.
that sets off the anxiety threat amometer.
Yes, 9 times out of 10, pool is helpful for people.
Yeah,
This is
yeah,
not this is uncommon that swimming bothers
yeah, yeah,
people.
but it makes
So,
sense when you start to
yes,
look at his history, and then you pull your
exactly.
physical exam in. So
Yes, exactly. Exactly. So what I did was, so the visits were now, I have 2 virtuals. So basically, I sent him home. So he didn't want to have, he didn't want to use a squat as a self-check. He just didn't want to go there, and I respect that. So what I had him do, I had him go home in a hook-lying position on his back, knees bent, and just do some breath work with lower trunk rotation. I started him off with that, and then he said, do I have to, inhale on the dropping? He's really wanted to know, and he goes, that may give me anxiety. I said, don't worry, just breathe. Breathe and
yeah,
go. You don't have to think about it. Just go.
nothing.
Do
Yeah,
whatever you.
that's whatever begins to start to make you feel anxious. See, that's the thing, is that you can use that as your test. Remember how we talk
Mhm.
about the test movements and reset?
Yes. Yes.
Anxiety is his test movement. Man, if that flips
Yes.
off the anxiety, we got to do something different.
That's a
There's
great
a different
idea.
way to do it, because you don't want to push into that. That's like pushing into it's like pushing into the threat for him.
Right.
You don't
So
want to
his
be the
self-check is
threat. Yeah, you
anxiety.
don't want to be the threat that's going to drive that the system's trying to protect against.
Right. Because if I
You
used a mechanical movement as a self-check, he was he gone.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
he
yeah.
obviously made that clear to me.
hmm I
So
would go with the anxiety one as that for him.
that's a
Like,
good one.
how do you feel with this? And I would check right in. Like, what is I would even use an
Like a
anxiety
visceral
scale with
feel.
this guy. Yeah. I
Yeah.
would use an anxiety scale with this guy. When you first talk to him, say, where are
Hmm.
we, as we sit down and we start talking today, tell me where you are on your anxiety scale. Just tell me where
Hmm.
you are. It's a
Hmm.
0 to 10.
Hmm.
Very easy to use. And let's just keep this alongside of us as we kind of go through some of this stuff today.
Yeah.
Because the goal is to be able to do things that isn't going to spike this scale.
Right.
So,
That's
and
good.
that's what
I
he
like
likes.
that.
He can attend to that.
Oh, totally. That's
Yeah.
visceral, and he can do that.
Mm-hmm.
That's great. I will do that because I was like, I used because I've been doing the virtuals. I've been
Mm-hmm.
just looking at him as my own self check. So
Yeah.
I sent him home with that and just basically some basic heel slides.
Mm-hmm.
Trunk rotation, heel slides. I gave him child's pose and doing a down dog against the wall with breath. That's all
Mm-hmm.
I did. Safe, breathe out.
Mm-hmm.
Do some decompression. Those are
Nice, easy,
always
novel
good.
movements. Yep.
Right. That's all I did. And he, videoed them and sent them to me and everything. So, uh, and he was okay, with that. So when I got him back, I'll combine the two telehealth visits. So, I was curious just to see, because I wanted to see what his upper limb tension testing was. And because I hadn't done that, and I was just curious
Mm-hmm.
if anything, nothing really came out of that. I
Yeah.
expected it, but I just wanted in my own mind, in case anybody says, didn't you do upper limb tension or slumping? I did. None of that came out as any kind of positive. So what I then did, I combined. So I'm just going to combine. And so the 2 visits, I'll combine what I did with the breath work with lower trunk rotation and the heel slides. I had him do the arm where I said, lift your arms, do alternating arm movement, do alternating like reverse flies, do that, do lower
Mm-hmm.
trunk rotation, straighten out, wave high, do anything that novel movement and breathe. So that was
Mm-hmm.
sort of his self-release,
Shake it out.
take it
Yep.
out. Exactly. And then his sort of child's pose, and I call it a wall dog, was basically just uh, getting his hands in a closed chain position to support
Mm-hmm.
the body. Then, so what I did, and I'm going to combine the exercise, what I did was I did give him squats, but I want your thoughts on that. So hold on one second. I did give him because of his shoulders, I was like, do you think you could do a wall push-up, do some wall landing? Do you think you could do that? Is that okay for you? He's like, oh yeah, no problem. So I had him do some wall push-ups, just easy movement in standing, just to get him moving, in the sense that I didn't want him to go to the floor. I didn't want it to move load with him, but I wanted him to feel like he was doing some form of exercise, and I wanted to get some bang for my buck because of the compression in the thorax. That was my only rationale. That's why I did it. And to do, just to get his, download his nervous system response. I just threw it out there. I was a virtual visit. I'm like, do a wall push. He showed me, he was fine. He basically did some wall lands where he stands 3 feet away from the wall and lands on the wall and pushes off. I said, breathe however you want to breathe, breathe however you can. Do upper chest breath, whatever, diaphragmatic. So with the wall land, I had him literally move his arms like a windmill and then land on the wall. Move his arms like a windmill, land on the wall. So we're getting full body movement with breath. The push-ups was more of something that he had mentioned in the eval that he did in his history. So I was like, let's do push-up, wall push-up. He was fine. So that's what I gave him. And then he said, I have weights at home. Should I be doing this? Some flies and some tricep extensions. I'm like, yeah, we did that. That's great. Those are going to recruit some of your smaller muscles that you need. Do that. And he was fine with that. So we've added some weight. So he's moving and he's breathing. I had him. So what I told him, because he didn't want me to talk about resets or self-checks. So I said, after you do all of this, just do a down dog against the wall, do a child's pose, do some of the breath work after you do all of this movement, just to sort of finish it up. That's what I told him. Because now that I'm talking to you about anxiety, I will say, if your anxiety level is high, definitely do that,
Yeah.
I wanted, because he wanted to go back to squatting, and I was like, let me watch you squat. So I had him in his kitchen on the virtual. I said, do a wall squat, put your hands on the wall and squat. Way to the right again, way to the right. So because of his anxiety level, I was not going to say, shift your hips. It's just not going to happen. I tried him. At the end of the day, I had him roll 2 towels up and put them under his feet. So just elevate your heels. Let's take some tension out of the system. Let's see what you look like. And he was, like, how should I fold the towels? I'm like, just fold them over twice, put them under your heels.
It's okay. Yeah, then that'd be perfect.
Exactly. So he did. He started out right, then he corrected and was all the way down fine. So let me know your thoughts on that. That's basically where we have left it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I would start taking some of these more challenging movements that he's having trouble with. I would actually be doing some single leg balancing with him too, and single leg balancing and maybe moving around on that single leg. But I would, before I even started doing the moving around with the single leg and the squat stuff, and maybe even some step ups, I would do some eye exercises with him.
Yes.
Just to to say, do some eye movements. First do the squat, and just say, let's just do this as a test retest to see if it works.
Yeah.
Because I don't know if it'll work or not, but I think that there's that component we talked about in there. So let's do this. Do the squat first, see how you feel. Yeah, I'm all the way over to the right, and that's okay. It's not a big deal. It's where your pattern is right now. But let's see if we can interrupt that pattern so that you have variance in the pattern. That's what we're after here. It's not just doing the same thing over and over, but doing a lot of different things so that you feel good and you feel movement and you're breathing and all of this is good, right? So take your eyes and just go right, left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right, left. You just tell them to go back and forth. I don't know, about 30 seconds worth, 20 seconds worth. And make sure it doesn't raise his anxiety. And then squat again and see what happens.
Got it.
See what happens, and maybe combine the towel with the eye movements. And the same thing, single leg stance, do some eye movements first and then do the single leg stance again. Does it feel different to you? Do you feel okay with that? How do you feel with that? And you can just say, because you can use some of this, especially since, and I would even couch it up for him intellectually, as you spend all day with your eyes fixed on the computer. One of the things we forget with exercise is we forget that we need to exercise our eyes as well.
That's fantastic.
And the eyes and the head and the neck all tie into all of this stuff. And, and you've been banged on the head a couple of times.
Yeah.
But, the biggest thing is that, our body's going to adapt to the environment that we live in. And so because the environment that you live in is necessary, and and I tell this to people all the time, is these high intellectual drivers, these high intellectual people. I said, you don't get the normal cues to stop being that high intellectual person. So you're going to have to figure out a way to interrupt yourself, get your phone out, set it, do something. And then you're going to need to do some of these movement things in between so that you can break out of that fixation. And you're, and I'll have them, you can even sit there and say, what feels better, eyes looking down or eyes looking up? I'm going to tell you every single time they're going to say it's harder to look up. It's because you're looking down all the time in the computer screen.
That's right. Plus he's so darn tall.
Yes. Yeah. And we look down at so why in the world would he ever look up? But if we can get that going, get the eyes up and down, get the eyes sideways, doing diagonals, doing all those different things, that can be extremely helpful for somebody who's gaze fixed all the time.
Interesting. So you're saying that basically do some eye movements up, down, right, left, and then do the squat like a test retest.
And see what happens. Yeah.
Yep. What about
just for your own kind of information, for his information, that, one of the things that may be going on with you is that your eyes are just fixed all the time on that computer screen, which you need to do for work, and I get it. But that means maybe we need to kind of think about, how many hours do you sit before you take a break? Like literally, when you get involved in a project or you get involved in something for work, do you just kind of like shut out the world and go? Because I promise you he does. Everybody who does high intellectual work does that. They just like fall in their little world. And it's a mean of escaping. And, because and that's why he doesn't want to think about where his body is, because
he's
too upsetting.
Too stressful.
He doesn't want those two worlds. He wants them to be separate.
So no, I agree. So in terms of the eye movements, anything, I know we've talked about this, and this is an area of is interesting to me, especially with these types of patients. I mean, in general, but anything else I can give him can he maybe look at something on the wall or a clock or anything?
He can put stickies on the wall and make a clock. Like 9, he can do 12 and 6 and 3 and 9, and you know where the rest of them are.
Like a pelvic clock.
Exactly. Or he can get the Clock Yourself app.
Yes, we've talked about that.
And just the nose is the center of the clock, and he holds his head still, and the eyes move around the clock as the app calls out the numbers.
Great idea.
And he has to speed it up because you want to go faster with the eyes. In the beginning, he may need to go slow, and he needs to kind of watch his anxiety. And then as he gets good at it, he can go faster and faster. You can go faster with the eyes than you can with your feet.
Ah, yes, of course. Actually, that's great. I'm going to get that out myself because that's a great idea. That's what I'll have him do.
I mean, that's just an easy one, and then what they can do, what I have them do is because the Clock Yourself app doesn't talk about the eyes at all. I adapt it to their eyes.
Yes.
And then the other one that I do is I tell them their eyes now become the center of the clock, and their eyes don't move. And when the app calls out the numbers, you move your head to the numbers.
Ooh,
so when it calls out 6, your eyes stay in the middle of the clock and you drop your head down. That means your eyes go up, right? So it's basically closed chain. The eyes are being fixed and the head is moving around the eyes. Or the head is fixed and the eyes are moving around in the head. Very much like we do. Very much like we do, like, hands down, move your body. Body still, move your arm.
Exactly. Head on body, body on head. Got it. Yes. Okay. That's fantastic because, once again, for people who are listening, yes, he has a history of concussion. However, he's also, if he didn't have the concussion, I still would have, he's had multiple issues. This guy is jacked up and sensitized and has read Norman Deutsch's book, for God's sakes. This is like a person who's very, very motivated, but has been to many people who've treated impairments. Impairments, okay?
Yes, this is not an impairment driven.
Not an impairment.
It is, but it's not your typical joint impairment kind of issue.
Correct. It's the area you want to look as a therapist to what area of the body is going to get you the most bang for your buck. I mean, at the end of the day, where can we induce the most positive change in somebody with this presentation? And when I saw him, when I was trying to correct his head and his pelvis. I'm like, his body doesn't like any of this.
Yeah, no.
And I zipped it right through there. It was like the shortest objective I've ever done. I was like, this is not done. We're done, you know? So that's why I wanted to bring him up, because I think he's interesting. He's a new patient. Probably will be virtual for the foreseeable future, which is not bad, because
Wow, but for somebody like this, it's perfect.
it is, isn't it?
Yeah, because you're just working with movement and novel movement and what's changing, what's not changing, what are your challenges, what are your barriers, you know, and just really helping him just recreate and redefine, you know, movement for himself. But I think it'll be great when you talk to him about, you know, what's interesting is, you know, thinking back on when you first told me what was problematic for you, and we've been looking at some of this stuff, I wonder if that's why swimming was a problem for you. What do you think? I would do it like that, like being curious. Like, I'm curious about swimming now with all this, you know, because of the head movements and stuff, and how that kind of, like, you know, when we were trying to do that, it made everything like crazy, and you know, and then let him kind of like begin to kind of, you know, because all you're doing is kind of putting up a, you know, Greg Lehman will call it confronting their beliefs. But I don't really like to think about confronting. What you're doing is you're just actually showing him a reality. You know, your perception is this, but here's maybe another example of what's going on too. And then they can kind of start looking at that and going, oh, you know, because all you're doing is providing some new things for them to consider, to break them out of the belief system, because, you know, our belief system becomes our value system, and we have to be, you have to provide some alternates, you know, to that belief system, but they have to begin to like make the connection to choose it. You can't come to them and say, here's what's going on and here's why swimming was hard for you. Instead, you present it kind of like, wow, you know, I was thinking about this and talking to you, and, you know, in your story, and if you remember back to that very first day we talked about this, and I thought about this, and I'm bringing it back because I'm interested in what you think. You know? You know, and then, you know, let him kind of like, oh, wow, that makes sense. Why, you know, so.
That's why it's so important. And I tell people all the time, it's so important to spend the time taking the history. There's so many people looking at the clock. They need to get the objective. It's not as important in my mind, this is my opinion. So much more important than getting their narrative, getting the patient's subjective is so important. It'll make your objective assessment so much better. Anyway, on that note, we'll definitely follow up on this guy, and I'll keep everybody posted. I hope everybody enjoyed it, and if you haven't joined our Facebook group yet, please do. It is Tough to Treat in parentheses podcast. It's pretty easy to find. Would love to have you join, and
more importantly, for up-to-date information and new initiatives that we're going to be rolling out this year, you need to be on our email list.
Correct.
So that is where we will be presenting all of the different things that are going to be happening around Tough to Treat in the future, is on our email list. So if you haven't signed up for Facebook, it's a lot of fun, but also come on in and sign up for our email list. And, you know, opt in, you get some free tip sheets and, you know, some stuff, but we're going to be rolling some other stuff out as well. And we'd love for you to be part of our email list and our community there as well for the latest information.
So if you go to www.toughtotreat.com, that's, you just sign up and you'll get a PDF. If you don't get the PDFs, email us or contact one of us. You should be getting them. It's a Clinical Pearls PDF I wrote, and Susan has some great tips regarding sleep and persistent pain. Awesome. And we also, we have our YouTube channel. If you don't have iTunes or Spotify or any of the other podcasting apps, you can listen on YouTube as well. So
easy to get to,
love to have you join
faster.
us. Exactly. Okie dokie. Well, thanks a million, guys. Bye.
Thanks, everybody.